All right, our quote of the day. I'm thankful for my struggle because without it, I wouldn't have stumbled across my strength. And that quote comes to us from Elle. And lady, if you are on Instagram, then if you are not following Elle, then you definitely should because she constantly posts inspirational quotes. And I think that this quote is just really fitting for the conversation that we're going to have today. So, T, when you hear this quote, what comes up for you?
Girl, you know what? It just makes me think about my life, but also the lives of so many people that I know, where there's another quote that says something like, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is your only option, right? And it makes me think about those
Right.
instances where we go through something and we look back and like, yo, how did I get, how did I get through that? You know what I mean? I was actually talking to a
Yes.
friend recently and he just got out of a really bad relationship and he's better and not bitter. And he was just talking about how it was just so nice and refreshing to hear his perspective because he was saying how, now that I'm out of that relationship, it allowed me to develop skills, right? Like more self esteem, being able to
Yes.
see like red flags in future relationships and allowed me to see what I don't want. And it also allowed him to come to grips with who he is and have the strength that this quote talks about. So I love this quote. It definitely brings back memories in my own life, but I'd love to know what does it say to you when you hear this quote?
It says all of that you just shared, right? Like it shares that it to me what it brings up is I am grateful for whatever I've gone through, right? Even if in the moment it was nerve wracking, fear inducing, whatever the emotions were that came up, right? Or maybe even right after, because that's normal to have those feelings, right? Like right after, I'm like, I'm F that person. Like, I'm nope. I'm glad to be done with that shit. Like,
F that person. That's what you're really gonna say.
well, you know,
I'm just I
I
saw
mean,
your
we're gonna
face.
keep it all the way. Fuck that person. Fuck that dude.
Okay,
Like, fuck
okay.
him. Right? Like that.
Exactly.
That's the real that can come up, right?
Hell yeah.
But I think that after some time has passed, because I'm just gonna be real, like
Yeah.
initially afterwards, that's the thought, right? Like, fuck him. Or like, I'm so grateful to just be out of this relationship because of
Yes.
whatever was happening, right? But
Yeah.
then after a while, I can look back and I can say, I'm thankful that I had this experience because it showed me things about myself that I might
Hmm.
not have otherwise dealt with, right?
Exactly. That part is so
And
powerful.
so I think when I think about toxic relationships and I think about like our conversation today, I do want to like remind us, good friend of the podcast, Elisa King,
Yes.
she has the quote on Instagram that I thought was so fitting for this conversation, right? Just a reminder that not every relationship that ends is toxic, right? Right now, we seem to be in a phase, it seems to be trendy to use that word to describe any relationship that we've just gotten out of, right? That, oh, I'm so happy to be out of that toxic relationship.
Yes.
But I would encourage us to really like step back and think about that relationship and ask yourself, was it truly toxic or were we just not aligned? And that's why the relationship needed to end, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The thing about it is sometimes when these concepts or certain words become buzzwords, they're just overused and it sort of dilutes the meaning of it. Like we hear toxicity so much. We hear, just so many different words. I can't think of any else. I can't think of other ones like narcissism. Let's use that one,
Yes.
right? Everyone's like, "Oh, this person's a narcissist." And it's like, really? Like, they might just be an asshole. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of this stuff is
Right.
overused. But Tom, can we dig into something really quickly? You ever like find yourself in a situation and then you look back on it years after and you're like, damn, I can't believe I went through that or I put up with that or I had that perspective. If we just like take a moment and kind of zoom in on perspective and how it can just
Yes.
shift and change so much based on life experience. Like I look back and I'm a very, confident person today especially compared to who I was before. And of course, I have rough days like everyone else and there are things I'm insecure about, but overall, like I love myself and I'm a confident individual. And I struggled so much with low self-esteem in the past and self-hate and a lot of other just negative self-defeating thoughts and patterns. And I put up with some bullshit in the past. And I think back to the stuff I put up with, and I'm like, yo, I would never in a million years do that today. And it just makes me think about how sometimes when we're in those situations, it really seems like, I don't know, it's just so different. Like we think this is what it is. Like this is this is the relationship I'm in. This is all I can maybe have, right? This is all I'm worth. And just, I wonder what that gap is between that point in time and then where we might evolve to. You know what I mean? Can you relate to that? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, I think, when you were saying that, I thought about our episode, one of our real recent episodes, season 10, episode 5, Calling Out or Calling In, a
Hmm.
conversation about cancel culture.
Yeah.
And I think about, at the time that we're recording this episode, Chrissy Teigen has been in the news a lot because of things that she posted
Mhm.
online in the past. Now, I
Right.
haven't gone in and read all the articles and all of that. Didn't have time to do all that. But what you were saying reminds me of that, right? That like how we are constantly evolving as people. And when I say evolving as people, I mean on an individual level, but also on a societal level, right?
Absolutely.
Because the thing is that some of the things that we did 5, 10, 15 years ago, some of it was a product of where we were individually,
Hmm.
but then, and so we naturally had some growth and development. But some of it was also being a product of our environment and what was the culture at the time, right? Like what was really part of the environment at that time.
Hmm. That's a really good point, and I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, I mean that's spot on. I think about even the music, right? And I don't know. We already dove into this, but it's crazy when you think that you could potentially be reduced to a moment that you had years ago when things were so different. You know what I mean? Um. So yeah.
But okay, so I like that statement that you had right there, right? Of like how you can be reduced to a moment that you had years ago.
Yeah.
And I think about how that ties into like dating.
Mhm.
So I think about how maybe a moment in time where I did something to a partner that if someone looked back and only looked at that experience,
Yeah.
how they how they what they would say, how they might judge is not reflective of who I am today.
Mhm.
And so I think I also try to think about that when I'm with dating as well, right?
Right. Right.
That one snapshot of what someone did one moment in time might not be reflective of who they are in their totality,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
Like I think if anything, it's like it's information.
Right.
So I might not automatically write someone off and say, oh, no, hell no, I ain't dating him. He told me this. Nah. Until I hear the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
until I get like full context.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I'm with you. It's definitely I feel like we've said this so many times in our previous episodes, like the human experience is so complex, right? It's very
Mm.
complex. So I know we're gonna dive into signs of a toxic relationship and also this juicy question of how did you start dating after a relationship ended? And was there a strategy? That's a good one. So should we dive into the signs first?
Yes.
Okay.
So I know that we've talked about in previous episodes about how to identify a narcissistic partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's also in season 10. So season 10, episode 2, season 10, episode 3, where we talk about narcissism and
Yes.
we bring on the narcissism expert, Dr. Ramani. Like, I just love her.
Yes. Me
Like, she
too.
drops so many gems. And so I think narcissism is definitely a sign of toxicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Narcissism looks like gaslighting, isolation, dishonesty. And you can have someone who is not narcissistic, but also displays some of those signs as well, right?
Right, right.
So you have someone who's being like that ties into part of unhealthy communication. So when someone is dishonest, the communication that you all engage in is passive aggressive, or you use silent treatment as a tactic. Your partner or you is constantly criticizing one another. Or when you all talk, you're defensive. Like you always feel the need to be defensive. That's signs of unhealthy communication, and unhealthy communication is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Jealousy is another one. A happy, healthy relationship, there's not going to be, you're not jealous of your partner, they're not jealous of you. And then, of course, we want to definitely point out abuse,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is sexual, physical, financial, or emotional. Any form of abuse is definitely toxic.
Now, when we talk about these things, there's always this thing in the back of my mind, like, well, this is not like absolute. And I guess the way that I think about it is if your relationship, if you're unhappy more times than you're happy, or if things are going bad more times than they're going good, then that's probably also a telltale sign. Because I feel like sometimes we have instances of you might be a little jealous, right? Maybe like, your boo. We talked
Yes.
about this before. Don't judge me, y'all, because this is just the first thing that comes to my mind. But your boo is working with Big Booty Judy, and you saw her at the holiday party, and maybe you just like, I feel like big booties are just in right now. So I'm just like, it's a good example. But yeah, you're just like, man, I'm feeling some kind of way, my partner's with this, with this person, they're hanging out about whatever. You might have instances where you might be a little jealous, or you might have instances where you're like, you know what? I was being petty and I gave my boo the silent treatment. Do you think that that
Right.
necessarily means that it's a toxic relationship, or was that maybe a toxic
No.
moment? Okay. That's
Yes,
that's what I
that's
was
that's a
thinking.
moment. But
I
yes,
would
yes, I
agree.
appreciate that clarification
Yeah. No,
of
I would agree. Because I feel like we kind of ebb and flow sometimes out of different, you know, toxic moments as we are all,
yes.
trying to become our best selves and do better. But I think that you made a good point. There are certain relationships where this is a common theme. This is the foundation of the relationship. So, Dom, let's dive up into the tea right now and talk about
Yes.
dating after a relationship ended. Now, I have not been in this game for a minute, so I'm trying to think back to these experiences. And I don't think I have the best advice, but I'd love to talk about your experience first, and then I'll talk about mine.
Yes. So I I think about my 20-year-old self, right?
Mhm.
And I know the phrase that I'm about to share is one that a lot of folks can relate to. The the best way to get over one is to get under another, right?
Mhm.
And that talks about rebounding, right?
Yes.
That like you are upset, devastated, whatever the feelings are about this one relationship ending. And so the sentiment is that, well, if you want to be happy again, go get somebody else, right?
Mhm.
And I do recall trying that in my 20s,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like that was like a mantra of like, okay, well, this relationship is done, or this situationship, or whatever was happening. This
Mhm.
person is done. On to the next one.
Yep.
And I think for me, and from other folks that I've talked to, through like clients, in therapy, it's problematic. It's so
Yeah.
problematic, right?
Yeah.
It's rare that your rebound person becomes your lifelong person, right?
Mm.
Rare. Rare, like, you know, we all trying out for the NBA. It's 100 of us trying out for the NBA, and we already know that out of the 100 of us trying out, like of the 100 of us trying out, only 3 of us are actually going to make it,
Right.
right? So the odds are slim as hell.
Oh, for sure.
And so for me, that's when I think about it like that from that perspective,
Mhm.
I I'm not a big gambling person or
Mm.
huge risk taker, right? Like I'm not that person that is taking those big risks. So my older evolved self says, "Nah, we're not doing this rebound, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm rebounding and I like my relationship ended on Friday and I'm like, I'm hopping back in that dating game on Monday, like I'm hopping back on the apps, I'm going out, like I'm, doing all the things. What I know is that if I do that, I'm going to end up repeating the same cycles.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Child. You know what that reminds me of, Dom? You ever take a vacation and you kind of have like a back-to-back vacation? Have you ever,
Yes.
has that ever,
Mhm.
so after my honeymoon, there was a speaking engagement and it was like a speaking tour. And so literally right after we came back from the honeymoon, my husband drove me to the he drove me home to pack my stuff. And the next day we were out back to go to the airport so I could fly out and do this speaking tour. And I remember being excited about it, but also it was one of those things where I was like, yo, this is a lot. And it was kind of like fun in the moment, but when I look back on it and I think about it, I barely had a chance to unpack my bag and like take my luggage out, clean my home, get grounded before I was off on this new journey. And it didn't really give me a chance to like center myself. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes that's how rebound relationships can be. It's like, sometimes we go on vacation and you're like, I need a vacation from the vacation. But if you don't really have a chance to
Yes.
like be and to process and to think about, what happened in this relationship? What did I learn? How can I be better? Right? Like how am I showing up in relationships? All that stuff. It can really, it can, like you said, it makes it easier for you to repeat the cycles and the patterns. And I don't know about you, but a life without self reflection and introspection to me feels extremely, I don't know, concerning is the word that comes to mind to me because I just feel like I just be kind of tossed, to and fro with the
Floundering.
wind. Yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
just literally floundering. Like, where am I going? What am I doing? And yeah, I think it's okay to have fun, if you're dating, you're just like, oh, this is nothing serious, but know that you're out there to do that. You know what I mean? Don't find out when you're like in the
Yes.
midst of all the situations. You're like, well, this person didn't call. Like, I guess I'm just out here trying to figure it out. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what it makes me think about.
It does.
And yeah,
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that like you so it takes me back to our season 1 episode 4 where we like
mhm.
talk about healing from a toxic relationship, right?
Yes. Oh my
So
gosh.
lady, if you haven't checked that out, please do so. Like that
Please.
is a really good episode, right? And
Yes.
so the I think it's important, right? Like so in that episode we talked about like, you know, feeling the feelings, like whatever the emotions come up, like allow yourself to feel
Mhm.
those feelings. Get to know yourself, which I think that's kind of what you were like getting at, right? Like the
Mhm.
combination of getting to know yourself and feeling your emotions, right?
Yes.
And noting the lessons learned so that hopefully, you don't repeat them, right? And then securing that support system, you have your girls like who at least I do. Let me speak for myself.
Yeah.
I have those girls that I know that will hold me accountable, and if if I'm messing up or I'm going off script from what I said, needed to happen, they're going to pull me back in, right?
Mhm.
In
That
addition to being the shoulder to cry on and things like that, right?
yeah.
But then the other piece too, the piece that we often don't talk about is we can get closure, but that closure from the relationship does not involve the other person.
That part right there, Dom. Okay. Can we lean into that for a second? Because I feel like oftentimes I used to always think that you needed to have a conversation with the other person. You gotta talk
Me
to them.
too.
You gotta, like, we have to come together and like talk this out. And no, it doesn't always end that way. Sometimes you have to have closure with yourself, and that's it.
Yes.
That's it. That's all. Like,
You, yourself, and yourself. Yes.
okay, yes.
Like it doesn't have to involve the other person. It's and I mean and sometimes it may involve the other person in the sense that you write a letter to them, right?
Mhm. Yep, yep.
But that letter doesn't get mailed, right?
Sometimes it doesn't.
Like,
Mhm.
like so it's really the closure is really for you.
Yes.
And
You'll need
oftentimes I think if
permission.
we yes, yes, permission given. Yes.
Okay.
Cuz like if we spend our time waiting for that other person so that we can have closure, either we're going to get sucked back into the relationship that we know is unhealthy,
Mhm.
or we're going to be missing out on opportunities to heal because we are focused on what this other person is doing.
Right? That, or even sometimes I think we use the closure, or the desire for closure, or the need for closure, as procrastination. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like you need this
Yes.
other person to acquiesce in order for you to move on. No, you can literally do it by yourself. You don't need permission. And I think that, like you said, oftentimes it's like sometimes when you make up your mind, you're like, okay, I'm done with this relationship. That's when they come crawling back. That's when they come with the flowers
Right.
and the chocolates and the all the good stuff.
All
That's
of it.
how it works.
Yes.
Okay. Just like showing you all the attention, doing all the things that you said you wanted them to do. And so now that we're talking about some of the flowery things about dating, let's talk about how to get back into the dating game after a toxic relationship.
Well, the first thing that I want to point out is
Hmm.
that we don't want to view it necessarily as a game, right?
Mm,
So when I think about that, when I think about words and how we attach meaning to words,
okay.
right? If we look at it as a game, then it becomes like this chasing, this cat and mouse, right?
Hmm.
Or it becomes like this, like playing a sport.
Right.
And while I might like sometimes when I'm explaining relationships to folks, I might use like a basketball analogy, but I've started to pull back from that because even though I'm using that analogy in terms of understanding, like if you're dating multiple people, I've pulled back from that because I don't want folks to be confused with how we approach it is like a game.
Yeah, that's a good
Because
point.
that's not the case. Like if you want to have a healthy relationship, you're not approaching it from a game mentality.
Mhm.
Because a game mentality is about I have to win.
Mm. And I have to play. You know what I mean? You know how people play games in
Yes.
relationships. Don't nobody want to be playing no games. And you know what? I think you're right. Like it's all about perspective, like we talked about earlier. If you see it like a game, it's going to be a game. Now, if somebody's playing games, you could just be like, "All right, deuces. This is not what I
Right.
signed up for." You know what I mean? But when it
Right.
comes to, we talked about manifestation in a few of the episodes, and so I think that that first tip that we have around knowing your goal in the relationship
Yes.
is really key. Sometimes your goal is just to have some fun. Okay? Sometimes you're like,
Right.
you know what? I just want to have some fun. You might want to, let's be real. Sometimes you're like, you know what? I just want to have some fun. I just want to be with this person, be a little nasty, and that's it. Have some adult fun,
Yes.
and boom, and that's cool. But just know what you're doing. And then sometimes you're like, you know what? I think this might be the future. This might be my person, or these might be my people, because we got our episodes about
Yes.
polygamy and all that. Just know what you're doing. Know why you do what you do.
Ex- exactly. And I think that lends to like our second tip of have clear communication about everybody's wants and needs,
Mm,
right? So
yes.
both parties will be clear. And I say both because, again, I'm talking about like the one on one communication. Both parties are going to be clear about what it is that they want. So if I meet you and I say that, what I'm looking for is eventually getting to a committed relationship, then that means that I am looking and making moves to get into a committed relationship. And then I for myself can define what that means to move towards a committed relationship, right? So does that mean that after 3 dates I'm only dating you?
Right.
Or does that mean that I'm dating multiple people and keeping my options open to see who aligns best with me,
Hmm.
right? But I'm communicating all of that to any person that I'm talking to.
I love that, and Diamond made me think of a story, so I'm about to tell you the story in the after show because it's a little long. So we're going to dive into
Okay.
that a little later. But I do want to touch on number three here, which is listen to your body and instincts. And I mean, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but our body be speaking to us. Like our body really speaks to us. And I think it's so important for us to
Yes.
recognize when our intuition is giving us a hint about something, when our
Yes.
intuition or our gut is telling us something. You know how you ever just be with someone and you're like, something don't feel right. Okay, well guess what? That is a sign. That is your body communicating. Like you didn't just make that
Yes.
up. Something don't feel right. You ever be walk I mean this is a little random, but like walking down the street and you're like, I feel like somebody's watching me or someone's behind me or like something just ain't right, or
Mhm.
you're in a setting or with someone, with a new person, and maybe you're like, I can't put my finger on it, but something about this person just isn't. You don't have to wait to find out what that is, okay?
Nope.
Like if your body is
Nope.
telling you that something ain't right and you got your skin, your hair on your arms raising, just move on, right? But then
Exactly.
also
No
the
questions
inverse,
asked. Walk
no
away.
questions asked. But the inverse is correct too. Like if you feel like, man, this feels really good. Like I feel super safe. This feels really positive. Wow, this person's not really my type, but I feel like we really connecting. Then again, listen to your body.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that listening to our body is super important. And then, but then, so our last tip is get to know the person, right? Because as you're, this is after you've listened to your body and your body is, not giving you any signs that you need to run. But if your body is giving you signs that, it's okay, we're safe, we're good, take time to get to know the person, right?
Mhm.
Like, really get to know them. So, more than just their favorite color, right?
Mhm.
Think about, go back to what your goal is. If your goal is, we just gonna be sex buddies,
Mhm.
then you get to know what they like regarding sex, right? But if, but let's say your goal is, we want to move towards a committed relationship, then get to know all the little things that matter to them, like their routine. Are they a
Mhm.
morning person or a night person? Is that something that you can work with? Do they see themselves being married? Do they want to have children? Right?
Mm.
What are
Yes.
their career and professional goals? What are their spiritual beliefs? What do they like to have for breakfast in the morning? Because that could be a deal breaker for some people, right?
Mhm.
Like little things.
Okay, two things I just thought of real quick. Now, let's add a little asterisk underneath. Now, one of my pet peeves is people snacking when they eat. Go to dinner with this person and see how they eat. Because you might be like me and you might be like, yo, I can't stand when people chew with their. Now, that would be a deal breaker for me. Like, if I
Yes.
know people who chomp with their mouth open
Their
when people
mouth
see the
open.
food, we couldn't probably couldn't even be friends, or we just can't eat around each other because I can't do it. But the other thing is, another little asterisk, watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. I
Yes.
Yo, when we go out and someone treats the server, or the server's doing something for them, but even it's like the way they treat a homeless person or the way they treat, someone who is providing a service even, if they're mean to that person, that's a deal breaker for me. Cause I'm like, we are all human
Yes.
beings here. Like I don't like when people do when they have this sort of superiority complex and they think that they're better than someone who's in a certain position. That is definitely a red flag. So beware, lady, watch out how that prospective partner treats people around y'all when you go out, whether it's the server or the hostess or just someone on the street. Like, just watch how they interact with folks like that, because that says a lot.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Like, think about what are your pet peeves?
Hmm.
What are the things that you are really passionate about?
Yes.
And see how they relate to you on those things, right? Because again, that goes to the little things that
Yes.
we don't always think about. But the more you get to know a person, those are the things that you're like, when y'all decide, because we're in a pandemic and in a lockdown, hopefully let's pray that that doesn't happen again in our
Please,
lifetime.
no.
But
No.
let's say that you're in a situation where you all are having to share each other's space for an extended period of time
Hmm.
that wasn't planned.
Hmm.
And hell, sometimes even planned a vacation, going on a
Yeah.
vacation. Let me Side
That's
note,
another one. That's another
vacation
one.
is a good way to get to know somebody.
Fantastic.
Like how they travel, even if it's just a road trip an hour up the way. How you all can travel together, that's a good sign of how well you all might get along in the future. That's super important.
That is big facts right there. Okay, you'll see the frustration and how y'all act. Okay, this is super random, y'all, but one time we went out of the country and I had booked the wrong train to go to another city, and child, me and my husband had to separate in the train station because I booked the flight. I booked the train first. I did something crazy. We were like, I think in like Madrid or something, and we had to like spend some time apart in the train station because it was like a couple hours delay. So just beware. Go travel with this person you think they the one, because you'll see stuff come up.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Should we do a quick recap, Dom, so we can get ready for the after
Yes,
show? After show. All right.
let's do it. All right. So, tip number 1, know your goal. Tip number 2, have clear communication about your wants and needs. Tip number 3, listen to your body and your instincts. And tip number 4, get to know the person.
Yay, we did it, Dom. Dom, did you see me looking down?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the baby monitor because I think she's about to get up. So we did it. We recorded our episode. Yay. Lady,
Yay.
we have well over 100 episodes. So be sure to check the archives. Okay. We've talked about mommy issues, daddy issues, infertility, miscarriage, narcissist, and more. So you can literally just Google a keyword along with our podcast name and find what you're looking for. Now, Dom and I are going to go hop on Patreon and record the after show. Also, you can tap into the after show right in app on Spotify or in Apple Podcasts. And the after show is kind of where we like let our hair down, and it's going to get a bit more informal. You'll also get a chance to see us on video, and you might even see the baby because mama got to do what mama
Yep.
got to do. So we'll see you over there on Patreon, and thank you for tuning in.